Hello, and welcome to a critical update. Think about the sheer mathematical violence required to dismantle the very foundations of planetary physics. For 4 billion years, the laws of motion have dictated that to move from point A to point B, an object must traverse the space in between, a cold, unbreakable Newtonian clockwork. But as of today, Friday, February 13th, 2026, that fundamental law of reality has been officially overridden by a power that treats the vacuum of space as a piece of paper to be folded at will. It is February 13th, 2026, and exactly 6 hours ago, the interstellar entity we have designated as 3I Atlas committed an act of celestial teleportation. At 8 Kaku UTC, NASA's Deep Space Network was tracking the city-sized mass at a stable position 1.5 million kilometers in front of Earth, near the L1 Lagrange point. It was stable, it was monitored, it was exactly where physics said it should be. But in the blink of an eye, the object didn't just move, it ceased to exist at point A and instantly materialized at point B, 800,000 kilometers directly behind Earth in our planet's night shadow. This is not a flight path. It is an instantaneous macroscopic quantum jump. To put the sheer scale of this into perspective, imagine an object with the mass of a large comet traversing over 2 million kilometers of space in less than 6 hours. To achieve that using conventional propulsion, it would need to travel at speeds exceeding 90 kilometers per second. That is not just fast, that is relativistic. And here is the impossible part. No acceleration was detected, no heat signature was found, and there was no sonic boom in the solar wind. NASA's Goldstone antenna and the ESA's Gaia Observatory confirmed the object simply ceased to exist at its first coordinates and materialized at the second. In my entire career as a theoretical physicist, I have seen electrons quantum tunnel, but never a 3 billion ton mass. The telemetry from the James Webb Space Telescope confirms that the spectral signature is identical. It is the same object. The probability of two distinct objects with identical chemical fingerprints appearing in these exact opposing locations is less than 1 in 800 billion. It is statistically zero. We are left with the conclusion that 3I Atlas is not a rock or a comet. It is an entity that does not obey the laws of Isaac Newton. By moving behind Earth into our planet's electromagnetic shadow, it has effectively shielded itself from solar interference and positioned itself perfectly to listen to our world. Until 48 hours ago, this object was tracking as a boring hyperbolic comet. The math was solid and the orbit was predictable. But at 8:14 UTC today, the math broke. It started with a signal loss at the Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex in Australia. One moment there was a strong radar bounce and the next total silence. Goldstone, the gold standard of tracking, pointed its 70-meter dish at the last known coordinates and found nothing. For 5 hours and 42 minutes, 3I Atlas effectively ceased to exist in our reality. At 1356 UTC, an automated telescope in Chile, part of the system designed to warn us of incoming asteroids, flagged a new object behind us. It was flagged as a potentially hazardous near-Earth object just 800,000 kilometers away. NASA's Center for Near-Earth Object Studies realized the velocity vector matched 3I Atlas perfectly, but the location was inverted. Spectroscopy confirmed the surface composition was a 100% match for the object that had vanished earlier. If it had traveled linearly, it would have had to pass within 10,000 kilometers of our surface, which would have torn it apart and shifted Earth's tides. None of that happened. The reappearance position is mathematically precise. The apex of Earth's magnetotail. This is a region where our magnetic field stretches away from the sun. And 3I Atlas is now immersed in a stream of high-energy plasma coming from Earth. The odds of a random jump landing exactly in this magnetic sweet spot are 1 in 4.7 billion. This is not a collision course. It is an insertion. It is acting like an observer finding a blind spot. From a theoretical standpoint, we have to look for flaws in our understanding of the universe. In classical mechanics, you cannot skip the space in between. SOHO and the Parker Solar Probe were watching. They saw nothing pass Earth. This is quantum tunneling on a macroscopic scale. The probability of this occurring naturally across every atom in a massive object is so small, it wouldn't happen in the lifespan of the universe. This forces us to consider a manipulated metric of space-time, essentially warping geometry to bring point A and point B together. When the object reappeared, gravimeters in France detected a momentary gravitational spike lasting 0.004 seconds, a gravitational snap. This is exactly what happens when you punch a hole in space-time. Furthermore, thermal data from the James Webb shows it is sitting at minus 230 degrees Celsius, near absolute zero. It is acting like a thermodynamic heat sink, actively absorbing heat to power its internal systems. This matches the profile of a massive cryogenically cooled machine required for high-performance quantum computing or superconducting magnets. On February 12th, the object's rotation suddenly stopped. It went from spinning every 8 hours to being tidally locked in 20 minutes. To stop the angular momentum of a 3 billion-ton object that fast requires immense force, yet we saw no thrusters. It is now locked onto Earth with a precision of 0.002 degrees. Radar images show unnatural geometric regularity, straight lines, and right angles on its surface. It looks like an antenna, and that antenna just turned on. An unauthorized high-power data stream was detected being sent to 3I Atlas from a localized point in the South Atlantic anomaly. This is a region where our magnetic belt is weakest. The transmission used the 1,420 MHz hydrogen line, the universal frequency for first contact. In response, the object pulsed gravitational waves modulated at 7.83 Hz, the Schumann resonance, or Earth's own heartbeat. It has synchronized with the biorhythm of our planet. Immediately after this handshake, authorities cut the public data feeds from the Green Bank telescope. They claim maintenance, but they cut the feed because they saw what was in the data. 3I Atlas is now geostationary, locked on, and has established a connection with something on our surface. It chose the darkness of our shadow to observe us without interference. The Hubble telescope has been retacked to stare into the dark patch behind us. Every hour brings us closer to the next phase of this encounter. Whatever 3I Atlas is preparing to do next, we are about to find out. When the Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex in Australia lost the radar bounce from the object's nucleus, it wasn't a gradual fade. It was a total, instantaneous blackout. Engineers initially assumed it was a simple calibration error, or perhaps that the object had tumbled, presenting a smaller cross-section to our radar receivers. But when the tracking request was handed off to the Goldstone Solar System radar in California, the absolute gold standard of deep space detection, the results were chilling. They pointed their massive 70-meter dish at the last known coordinates of 3I Atlas and found a total void. For 5 hours and 42 minutes, 3I Atlas effectively ceased to exist in our reality. It was not at point A and it was not moving toward point B. It was simply gone. At 1356 UTC, an automated survey telescope in Chile, part of the Atlas network designed to warn us of incoming planetary threats, flagged a new object. It wasn't looking in front of Earth. It was looking behind us into the darkness of the anti-solar point. The system flagged it as a near-Earth object, potentially hazardous, closing in at a distance of just 800,000 kilometers. When the alert went out, 3 independent agencies turned their eyes to this new intruder. NASA's Center for Near-Earth Object Studies ran the orbital parameters and realized the velocity vector matched 3I Atlas perfectly, but the location was inverted. The European Space Agency's Gaia mission caught the transit, and their spectroscopy confirmed the surface composition, a mix of organic thelins and metallic iron, was a 100% match for the object that had vanished 6 hours earlier. The Amateur Astronomer Network began uploading images from the night side of Earth, showing a point source of light that was rhythmically pulsating. The object had not traveled through the space between point A and point B. If it had traveled linearly, it would have had to pass within 10,000 kilometers of Earth's surface to reach its current position so quickly. At that distance, our gravity would have torn it apart, the tides on Earth would have shifted, and every satellite in geostationary orbit would have registered the disturbance. None of that happened. It disappeared from the day side and appeared on the night side. It is as if a train vanished from Philadelphia and instantly appeared in London without ever crossing the tracks in between. As a physicist, when I see an object violate the laws of motion, I don't look for magic. I look for the flaw in our understanding of the universe. In classical mechanics, objects must traverse a continuous path through space-time. Yet SOHO and the Parker Solar Probe, our sentinels watching the space between Earth and the Sun, saw nothing pass. This leaves only one concept in physics that allows for this behavior: quantum tunneling. Occasionally, a subatomic electron vanishes and reappears on the other side of a barrier. But the probability of every single atom in a massive city-sized object simultaneously tunneling to the same new location is so infinitely small, it wouldn't happen in the lifespan of the universe. This forces us to consider that 3I Atlas is utilizing a manipulated metric of space-time. Imagine space as a sheet of paper. Normally, you crawl across the surface, which takes time. But if you can fold that paper, if you can warp geometry, you can bring point A and point B together, step across, and let the paper unfold. This is the basis of the Alcubierre warp drive metric, which requires exotic matter and negative energy, things that shouldn't exist in a natural comet. The evidence for this warp hypothesis is found in the gravity data. When the object reappeared behind Earth, gravimeters at the University of Strasbourg in France detected a momentary gravitational spike lasting 0.0104 seconds, a gravitational snap. This is exactly what you would expect if a massive object suddenly punched a hole in the local space-time fabric, creating a gravitational shock wave. If 3I Atlas is manipulating gravity to move, it is not drifting. It is navigating with technology far beyond our own. Furthermore, infrared scans from the James Webb Space Telescope show 3I Atlas is sitting at minus 230 degrees Celsius, near absolute zero. This is physically impossible for a natural object sitting that close to Earth. The ambient heat from the sun should warm it up, even in Earth's shadow. The fact that it is maintaining this deep freeze temperature suggests it is actively absorbing heat, acting like a thermodynamic heat sink. High-performance quantum computers and superconducting magnets must be kept at these temperatures to function. The thermal signature of 3I Atlas matches the profile of a massive cryogenically cooled machine, not a dirty snowball. Then at 23 UTC, the rotation stopped. Natural comets spin, and 3I Atlas was spinning once every 8 hours. But in just 20 minutes, that spin decayed to zero. To stop the angular momentum of a 3 billion-ton object, that fast requires a braking force of immense magnitude, yet we saw no thrusters and no exhaust. It simply decided to stop spinning and stare at us, tidally locked with a precision of 0.002 degrees. The radar images are now resolving unnatural features, geometric regularity, straight lines, and right angles. Nature builds in fractals, intelligence builds in right angles. The front of 3I Atlas shows a flat reflective surface perfectly perpendicular to Earth. It looks like an antenna, and that antenna just turned on. But we are far from finished, because what occurred just 60 minutes ago shifts this conversation from an astrophysical anomaly to a full-blown existential crisis. At 1842 UTC, the Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia, one of the most sensitive and sophisticated listening posts on this planet, detected a massive structured signal spike. This wasn't the random chaotic hiss of solar wind or a burst of background radio noise. It was a coherent, high-bandwidth data stream. And here's the true bombshell. The signal was not being broadcast by 3I Atlas. It was being transmitted to 3I Atlas, and it was originating from right here on Earth. Let that reality sink in for a moment. For the past hour, an unauthorized high-power transmission has been beamed directly from a localized point on our surface straight into the receiver of this entity sitting in our orbital shadow. We have traced the source, and it isn't NASA, it isn't the ESA, and it isn't any known military branch. The signal is pulsing from a specific coordinate in the South Atlantic anomaly, a region where Earth's magnetic protection is at its weakest and electronic glitches are common. But this was no glitch. The carrier wave was modulated at 1,420 megahertz, the hydrogen line. This is the universal frequency of astrophysics, the specific channel that scientists have always predicted would be used for a first contact event. Someone or something on our soil is actively communicating with this object. And 3i Atlas just responded 10 minutes ago. The object emitted a burst of gravitational waves, waves without mass that shouldn't even exist without a cataclysmic event like a black hole collision. These waves were modulated with a recognizable pattern. When NASA's LIGO detectors ran the sequence through their decryption algorithms, they didn't find prime numbers or complex math. They found a mirror. The gravitational ripples were mimicking the exact electromagnetic frequency of the Earth's own heartbeat, the Schumann resonance of 7.83 hertz. 3i Atlas has effectively synchronized its own internal pulse with the biorhythm of our planet. If this were a natural occurrence, it would be the single greatest coincidence in the history of the universe. But it isn't. We have just witnessed a formal handshake, a connection established between a craft that can warp space-time and a source down here in the South Atlantic anomaly. The panicked reaction from the global scientific community confirms the gravity of the situation. Within minutes of this handshake, the live public data feeds from the Green Bank telescope were abruptly cut. The screens went black. Maintenance was the official excuse, but we know better. You don't take the world's most critical listening device offline for routine maintenance when an interstellar entity is knocking on the front door. They cut the feed because they saw what was in the data, and they didn't want the public to see it. Let's establish what we know as absolute fact. 3i Atlas moved from our day side to our night side in under 6 hours, violating every law of orbital mechanics. It is now geostationary, tidally locked, and pointing a geometric antenna-like surface directly at us. It has exchanged a coherent high-energy signal with a source inside the South Atlantic anomaly. And finally, the authorities have officially pulled the plug on public transparency. These are not theories. These are documented observations from February 13th, 2026. The only question left is the most disturbing one. Why the shadow? If this were a diplomatic mission, you would announce yourself in the light. You would land where everyone could see you. But 3i Atlas chose the darkness. It chose the one spot where the sun cannot reach it, yet where it can monitor everything we do. Physics tells us the magnetotail is a shield, but strategy tells us it is a blind spot, the perfect place to deploy something without interference. As you watch this, the Hubble Space Telescope has been retacked to stare exclusively into the dark patch behind Earth. Every hour brings us closer to the next phase of this handshake. If 3i Atlas is a probe, the scan is finished. If it is a vessel, it has reached its destination. The signal from the South Atlantic anomaly remains active, the gravitational ripples are still pulsing, and the connection is open. Whatever 3i Atlas is preparing for next, we are about to find out.